Bene, stiamo per intervistare il dottor Stephen Bryen, che forse non è molto noto al grande pubblico italiano, ma è stato ed è tuttora uno dei maggiori esperti a livello mondiale di cyber-terrorismo, di tecnologie militari, e ha rivestito degli importanti ruoli sia nel mondo industriale sia soprattutto nelle amministrazioni statunitensi. È stato il vice sottosegretario dell'amministrazione Reagan al tempo in cui venne delineata quella che la stampa ha chiamato le guerre stellari, le guerre spaziali, e lui fu uno degli artefici di quel progetto che contribuì notevolmente a mettere in ginocchio l'Unione Sovietica in quegli anni. Viene considerato anche un esponente dei neoconservatori americani. So che molti neoconservatori dicono non capiamo perché ci chiamano così. Ed è un grande esperto comunque di politica internazionale. L'intervista si terrà in inglese, anche se il dottor Bryan capisce perfettamente l'italiano, per una questione di praticità. Io mi scuso anticipatamente per il mio accento. Grazie. Eh, allora, about the Iranian deal. Which perspectives does it lead to? In Europe, the majority of leaders seem enthusiastic about it, perhaps under an economic point of view. And you, how evaluate the agreement?
Well, you should have asked me. You should have asked me first of all, who's against it. Obviously, the Israelis don't like it. The Saudis don't like it. The Emirates don't like it. They're very nervous about the possibility of a nuclear Iran. So I think that they have little confidence in this deal. Now, the question in the United States is what the Congress will do. Probably a majority of both the Senate and the House of Representatives in the U.S. are likely to oppose the deal. In the United States, we have a very interesting legislative system where if they reject the deal and the president then vetoes the act that rejects the deal, they have to come back with a two-thirds majority to win. And the general belief is that President Obama controls enough of the Democratic votes in the Senate and House that he can sustain his veto, which means the deal will be approved in a sense. It's a negative approval, but it will be approved. So I think the outcome, that's what the outcome looks like today. You know, a few weeks from now could be totally changed. If Iran does something unexpected in the interim period, it could be changed. If there's some terrorism that's tracked back to Iran, could be changed. So there are a lot of variables in this, and what the outcome will be in the United States.
Now, as a cyber-terrorism expert that you are, how can you evaluate this threat of cyber-terrorism? And is it a concrete threat for global security? And which are its links with terroristic organizations?
Well, I think there's a couple of things about it. I mean, first of all, the big concern in the United States is that cyber terrorism can destroy what we call the critical infrastructure. These are the utilities, the power plants, the water supply, transportation hubs, government operations, even military operations, could be paralyzed if enough damage was done to the computer networks and computer-based communications that are so critical to national survival. So the first worry is that. Is it a worry about terrorists per se? I think that when we talk about this kind of terrorism, we're primarily talking about the threat of state terrorism, or a state action that is connected with the possibility of warfare. And what has been generally thought as to what's happening right now is that our friends in other countries, and we can suggest that Russia and China are high on that list, have been probing the system, looking for vulnerabilities, attempting to destroy some databases to see whether they could do it, and most of all, and particularly in the case of China, stealing technology. We like to say that we have two defense budgets, one for us and one for them, because the reality is they're getting hold of lots and lots of information that is not classified information, and in our country, if it's not classified information, it's not encrypted. So the first, I might as well tell you my secret cure, because the first thing we need to do is to encrypt all government information and defense information, 100%. Encrypt it all. Treat it as if it's classified and encrypted. So that's step one. And the second is we have to figure out how to prevent what we call denial of service attacks. A denial of service attack means that your computer cannot function because it's being swamped by requests coming from who knows where, but you're unable to function. So how do we block denial of service attacks is a very major issue for protecting the critical infrastructure. So that's the situation as I see it right now.
Terrorism and Islamic State, Daesh. About Daesh, are the coalition countries doing enough to take such an advance? Or is their strategy still ineffective? What should be the role of NATO in this strategy?
Those are good questions. Those are very good questions. Well, NATO has no role right now, officially. So and it's not clear to me that it's NATO that needs to react, but I do think we need a coalition. Oh, we say that we have a terminology called the coalition of the willing, that are willing to take them on. The problem is it's a power vacuum. You have a crumbling state in Iraq. You have a crumbling state in Syria. You have a crumbling state in Yemen. You have a crumbling state in Libya. All these places are in terrible turmoil, to which you can add Afghanistan to the pot as well. And right now, we don't have a strategy of any kind to deal with them. We are trying to reinforce Iraq. We are using air power a little bit against some of the rebels in Syria, but we're not sure which rebels on any one day. And I think that the lack of a strategy, I think the British now are saying we need to go and destroy them. But you need a plan to do that, and I haven't seen one.
As we said, the Islamic State is an international threat for security. Of course, it is an important worry for Israel. But on one side has this Islamic State threat, and on the other side, there is this deal that we have talked about between the United States and Iran. Does Mr. Netanyahu, according to you, have the right to worry and be anxious? And how do you explain this sentence, which was said by the former head of Israeli intelligence on the Iran deal, which is without an agreement, Iran will be free to do as it pleases?
Well, I can explain it this way. I mean, remember that we had an embargo on Iran, a very tough embargo. Not perfect, but tough. Part of this deal has been getting rid of the embargo, and a lot of it's already gone. So in a technical sense, this deal facilitates some real risk in terms of Iran's ability to come up with nuclear capability. Sorry. My own sense of this is that the Israelis have a reason to be worried because they don't trust Iran as a stable country. I think that's the key ingredient when we look at this. It's not that Iran has a nuclear weapon, although that's bad enough, but it's the fact that they can't trust this regime to be stable. And making it much worse is the fact that the Iranians, on a daily basis, go out of their way to say, we want to destroy Israel. So if you've doubted about what their intentions are, they make them terribly clear. And I think that this is what's alarmed not only the Israelis, but many in the United States. Of course, the Jewish community is deeply concerned about it, but not only, because this agreement should be to prevent conflict, not to lead to conflict. And I think the real concern here is that it may not accomplish that if on the same day that you sign such an agreement, Mr. Khomeini and his people start saying, you know, America is the worst country in the world, we have to destroy America, we have to destroy Israel. This kind of language is very detrimental to the deal. Very, very detrimental.
We can speak about the policy to increase the American research and development. As an expert of this industry, how do you evaluate scusate, the role of a propeller of military research and development playing for the civil one?
Well, you know what's happened is that if we do a little bit of history and we look at post-World War II, in World War II, the United States invested billions of dollars in R&D, research and development, and came up with lots of new technologies and followed that up with a very energetic space program that didn't even exist before World War II, and developed a lot of technology for space exploration, all of which has been very, very important to America's defense. But in the last 20 years, the tables have turned around, and it's the civilian research that has been the leader in a lot of fields, whether it's ceramics or electronics or dynamic systems, computers, go on and on. It's a renaissance of great importance, most of which was not funded by the government, most of which was private money built around commercial products, but all of which has defense applications. So if you're going to invest in R&D, the question is, should the government do it or should the private sector do it? And the problem with government investment is that sometimes it works, like NASA I think has been a very good investment, and sometimes it's wasteful, and we build airplanes we don't need, or we build ships that don't float, and you know, these kind of things. And we spend an awful lot of money, and there's no pressure to be cost effective, there's no pressure to get results in the way we'd like to see pressure. So I have a mixed view on it. I think that the government should promote private investment and invite more and more private investment in defense technologies and do whatever it can to facilitate that with regulations and that sort of thing, but to stay out of directly doing it itself. I think as long as the government tries to do it itself, it's too expensive and doesn't always work.
One last question, again, concerning this research and development issue. How would you compare chance discoveries and spontaneous research, such as garage biology, for example? How would you compare it with structured research? And thanks to the internet, do you think that spontaneous research will be more effective than structured one in the end?
I can't answer that question, actually, because I think there's two levels of research. We call about fundamental research, where a breakthrough happens because someone actually has a vision and insight. And where that comes from, you never know. I mean, you know, remember Albert Einstein worked in the German patent office. He had an insight. It turned out to be a big one. He didn't have any government money, but he had patent office money and to provide his income and let him do some research, and that's what he did. So you just don't know. I mean, the other thing, I think Americans have one issue, which is, to me, a very significant issue, and that is what we call NIH. NIH means not the name of the hospital in Bethesda, Maryland, the National Institute of Health, but rather not invented here. Okay. We have this kind of tunnel vision about if it wasn't invented in America, it's no good. And I've got news for them. You know, the fact of the matter is that today we're seeing amazing work being done in Europe, in China, in Russia, in Israel, and all these places. A lot is going on. And I think we're now in a global world. So your point about the internet is quite on target, because now you can communicate with anybody, anywhere, anytime, and in any language, because you have translate programs, you have everything you need to share information, share ideas. And that's the new frontier. That's how things are going to work in the future.
Una curiosità. When we could read your book on cyber-terrorism in Italian?
Good question. Well, I just brought out I started with an e-book, an electronic book, published on Amazon. And now we have a hard copy version, which is out, printed version, in English, in Inglese. We should do one in Italian. But I also have another book coming out in December, which is, I think, even a more ambitious book. It's called Technology, Security, and National Power, Winners and Losers. And that will be published by Transaction Press, and I suspect it will be available in Italian. So let's hope so.
Lo leggerò in inglese. A leggere ci arrivo. Thank you very much. Noi ringraziamo molto Mr. Bryen per l'intervista che ci ha concesso e speriamo di avere altre occasioni di incontrarlo, magari in un futuro insieme a un altro illustre nostro ospite, al nostro illustre ospite, al nostro workshop, a un nostro convegno di studi. Thank you very much.